The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting a gentle glow over the wooden table where I sat with my mug of chamomile tea. Outside, the world was waking up, but inside my clover lawn whispered serenity. It had been that way since I first planted it. A soft, green sea that required little more than the occasional trim and a few moments of admiration. Clover was hardy, practical, and delightfully rebellious. It held an allure for me, an embodiment of nature's quiet defiance against rigid order. Yet it seemed that not everyone appreciated my vision. The HOA had other ideas. They were the perpetual guardians of conformity, aspiring only to rows of obedient sod. Their decrees were endless, a paper blizzard of bylaws that materialized in my mailbox with alarming regularity. The latest was a demand to replace my clover with regulation grass, an affront dressed up as a civility request. Karen, the president of this symphony of sameness, relished her role as the conductor. She was a maestro of monotony, orchestrating a neighborhood where each blade of grass stood in militaristic formation. Her presence was unmistakable, her perfume lingering like a floral assault on the senses. Even now, I could sense her plotting. Her actions were predictable. A note in my mailbox, a thinly veiled ultimatum wrapped in the guise of concern. Her letters were a marvel of passive aggression, each word painstakingly crafted to sound reasonable yet dripping with silent judgment. As I read her latest missive, I sighed and set it aside. The clover was not just a lawn. It was a testament to resilience and sustainability. Karen's demands seemed small in comparison, a squabble against the backdrop of nature's grand design. I had no desire for confrontation. Instead, I sought peace through action, a resolution that spoke louder than words. It was time for a calculated response, one that would elevate the humble clover to its rightful place without yielding to petty tyranny. The plan was simple, yet elegant. I would have my clover certified as sustainable turf. It was not a grand gesture, but rather a quiet rebellion. The process was straightforward, an application that highlighted the clover's environmental benefits and its role as an eco-friendly alternative. It was a small step, but one that aligned with my values, a harmonious blend of practicality and principle. The days passed, each one a gentle reminder of the clover's resilience. As I awaited certification, the neighborhood seemed untouched by the silent battle. The rhythm of life continued, a ballet of mundane routines and whispered conversations. Yet, beneath the surface, change was brewing. The certification would be my shield, a bulwark against Karen's relentless crusade for conformity. It was a statement that my choices mattered, that nature's whimsy could coexist with human intent. In the end, the clover stood as a testament to quiet strength, a reminder that even amidst the cacophony of rules, there was room for individuality. The certification arrived, a simple piece of paper that bore the weight of my principles. As I placed it on the wall, I felt a sense of calm. The clover remained my refuge, a living testament to the power of gentle defiance. And as for Karen, her battle was lost, though she knew it not. Her realm remained untouched, yet a silent victory unfurled beneath her feet. The clover, now officially recognized, danced in the breeze, whispering secrets only I could hear. The late afternoon sun slanted through the bay windows, casting a warm amber glow across the kitchen as I set down the latest letter from the HOA. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic absurdity, an opus of petty grievances wrapped in flowery language. The ink still smelled fresh, like the earth after a summer rain, and the words danced mockingly before my eyes. The letter detailed the latest offense. My clover lawn, a sea of green and white that swayed gently in the summer breeze, was deemed non-compliant. It lacked the uniform, militaristic precision of sod. Sod, they insisted, was as mandatory as the annual dues and the Christmas lights ban after January 5th. I imagined Karen, the HOA president, furiously typing away at her keyboard, her fingers clattering like a woodpecker in overdrive. Her vendetta against my clover was escalating. Last week, a citation for an unauthorized garden structure materialized on my doorstep. A trellis, innocuous and weathered, supporting a cascade of sweet peas. The week before, an email chiding my window boxes for being inconsistent with approved neighborhood aesthetics. Each communication was more ludicrous than the last, yet Karen wielded them like weapons in a private war. Gossip bloomed in our little enclave. The whispers carried like pollen in the spring wind, infecting neighborly conversations. "Did you hear about the Clover? I heard she's trying to ruin our property values." The chorus sang on, crescendoing at the community center meetings where Karen presided like a self-appointed queen. The irony was almost delicious. My Clover, a beacon of sustainability in a sea of chemically reliant lawns, thrived without the trappings of fertilizers or pesticides. It was a paradise for bees, tiny, diligent workers whom I imagined Karen detested as much as she did my lawn. The Clover did not conform to her vision of suburban Eden, but it flourished nonetheless, defiant and unyielding. The tension was palpable, an electric current that hummed beneath the veneer of neighborly smiles. I could feel it building, like the pressure before a storm, the air thick with expectation. There was power in that tension, in the quiet strength of pushing back against the absurdity. A plan, half-formed, began to take root in my mind. It began with the crinkle of paper, the rustle of an envelope. My Clover would be certified as sustainable turf. A simple phrase with the power to turn the tables, to transform my rebellion into something untouchable. As I considered the document from the environmental organization, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. This certification would be my shield, a barrier against the encroaching tide of sod and sameness. I imagined Karen's face upon receiving the notice, a mixture of disbelief and quiet fury. In the waning light of day, the garden seemed to nod in agreement. The Clover, resilient and tenacious, whispered a promise of victory. This was not just about grass, I realized. It was about standing firm, about cultivating beauty and sustainability in the face of conformity. Outside, the Clover shimmered under the setting sun, a mosaic of green and white defying the HOA's monochrome vision. And as night fell, I imagined the sweet sound of bees returning to my lawn, a symphony of wings in the quiet darkness. The battle was far from over, but for now, I savored the small triumph of a plan set in motion. The sun rose, casting a quiet smirk over the neighborhood, as if it understood the simmering tension beneath the manicured facades. In the soft morning light, my lawn was an emerald oasis, each clover leaf a tiny triumph struggling against the HOA's rigid grip. Months had passed since the initial confrontation, yet the memory lingered like a thorn. The threat of uniformity looming over our suburban utopia made each Clover's resilience all the more satisfying. I had prepared meticulously, knowing that subtlety was my sharpest weapon. Every letter, every accusation from the HOA was carefully documented, a stack of evidence growing steadily in my study. It became my ritual, mornings with coffee, reviewing their demands, evenings cataloging their petty insistences on conformity. The letters marked with the imperious signature of the HOA president, Karen. Oh, she thrived on the power of that title, each letter a personal crusade against individuality. Karen's vision for our neighborhood was a sterile uniformity, an endless sea of sod, neatly trimmed and devoid of personality. But I saw things differently. Each clover leaf in my yard was a testament to a deeper truth. Nature thrived in diversity. The process was labyrinthine, requiring patience and a deft touch. I transformed my humble clover patch into a certified sustainable habitat. It was a small victory, but a powerful one. The certification came in a plain envelope, official and understated. The irony wasn't lost on me. An official endorsement of the very thing they railed against. I placed the certificate in a simple frame, letting it rest on my mantel as a silent testament to my rebellion. The neighborhood buzzed with anticipation of the next HOA meeting. It was scheduled for a Tuesday, the air already pregnant with unspoken tension. Karen would be gleaming with her typical bravado, confident in her crusade. The meeting unfolded with predictable choreography. Pleasantries exchanged, minutes approved, until it was time for grievances. Her voice, crisp, unwavering, pierced the room as she highlighted my clover lawn. The room shifted, eyes darting, uncomfortable murmurs mingling with the stale air. I waited, letting the tension build. Then I stood, the room falling into a hush, anticipation hanging heavy as a storm cloud. The moment was ripe, the air electric. I handed over the certification, watching Karen's expression falter. Her lips tightened, the color rising in her cheeks, and a single line of dialogue broke the silence, her voice a strained whisper. "Is this real?" Her disbelief was a symphony, a palpable shift in the room's energy. The balance of power teetered, the scales of justice realigning. I nodded once, the motion deliberate, like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. In that moment, I felt the weight of every Clover leaf, every morning spent nurturing my quiet rebellion. The meeting continued, but the air was different now, charged with a newfound respect for the unexpected resilience of nature. Karen's eyes avoided mine for the rest of the evening, her authority quietly fractured. As I left, the evening air was cool against my skin, each step a deliberate reminder that conformity could be challenged, that individuality had a place even in this uniform landscape. The clovers swayed gently in the breeze, whispering secrets of defiance as I walked past. In their quiet way, they spoke volumes, their presence a testament to a simple truth. Sometimes, the strongest message is the one that grows silently, slowly, and undeniably. The day dawned with the kind of hushed promise that only early spring can offer. The air was cool, almost brisk, whispering across the clover patch that carpeted my front yard. It was a sea of green, a gentle rebellion against the HOA's rigid insistence on uniformity. Each leaf shimmered with dew, the sun casting a golden glow that made the clover appear almost ethereal. I stood at the edge of the driveway, sipping my coffee, feeling the warm ceramic against my palm, and let a small, satisfied smile slip. I had spent countless hours researching, poring over environmental regulations and sustainability certifications. It was meticulous work, almost meditative in its detail. I had learned more than I ever thought possible about native plants and their ecological benefits, knowledge that now armed me like an invisible shield. My clover was not just a defiance. It was a fortress. It wasn't long after I submitted the paperwork that the letter arrived. An official-looking envelope, crisp and white, with the unmistakable insignia of the Environmental Sustainability Board embossed in the corner. Inside, my certification lay like a talisman, a declaration of my yard's right to exist as it was. Sustainable turf, it read, hobbling the HOA's ability to demand sod. I allowed myself a private moment of triumph, the paper crinkling softly as I folded it back into its envelope. The irony was not lost on me. My lawn, deemed a nuisance by those who valued aesthetics over ecology, was now a standard bearer for environmentally friendly practices. I imagined the HOA's reaction. Disbelief, likely. Frustration, definitely. Perhaps even a grudging respect, though that seemed unlikely. Karen's rarely conceded defeat without a fight. I watched the neighborhood slowly come to life, the quiet of morning giving way to the hum of car engines and the distant chatter of children. My next-door neighbor, oblivious to my machinations, waved as he collected his newspaper. I returned the gesture, savoring the calm before the storm. For I knew the HOA was unlikely to let this go unchallenged. As if summoned by my thoughts, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the street. Karen, clipboard in hand, the edges of her blazer flapping like a bird's wings in her determined stride. She marched with purpose, her eyes locked on my yard, a battleground she refused to abandon. I stayed rooted in place, coffee in hand, as she approached. Her expression was a tempest of emotion, a whirlwind of indignation and disbelief. I could feel her words before they reached me, a palpable tension in the air, but I held my ground, allowing silence to be my ally. Finally, she stopped, her eyes narrowed, a question unspoken. I offered nothing but a calm gaze, meeting her fury with my quiet resolve. It was in this moment that she broke the silence, her voice a mix of frustration and incredulity. "This changes nothing," she spat, the words dropping like stones between us. I nodded, acknowledging her declaration not as a threat, but as an inevitability. Change is slow, resistance even slower. But the clover, resilient and steadfast, knew this well. As I turned back towards the house, her presence lingering like a storm cloud, I felt the weight of history in my pocket. The letter, the certification, tangible proof of my quiet victory, reassured me. In the end, it wasn't just about the lawn. It was about the way I had woven my life into the soil, roots deep and unmoving, a story told through each clover leaf that turned towards the sun. The HOA might continue their battle, but I had already won the war of my own making. My yard was a living testament, a green manifesto that whispered of change and resilience, growing quietly beneath the suburban veneer. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across my yard, where the clover swayed gently in the evening breeze. It was as if the earth itself sighed in relief, finally free from the oppressive weight of turf wars and the relentless nags of the HOA. My clover, now officially certified as sustainable turf, lay like a verdant carpet, whispering secrets of resilience and quiet triumph. Karen, with her ever-watchful eyes and clipboard clutched like a scepter of judgment, had finally been sidelined. Her voice, which had once pierced the neighborhood like a siren, was now muted, reduced to a murmur among the ranks of our community. The homeowners had realized, one by one, that the tyranny of uniformity was nothing compared to the freedom of choice. It hadn't been easy. Karen had rallied her minions, those who still believed in the supremacy of sod and the gospel of green conformity. They'd marched up and down the street, pamphlets fluttering in their wake like a biblical plague of locusts. But the tide was turning. The Clover's certification was a beacon of change, and the neighbors began to see it, not as a rebellion, but as a revelation. The irony was sweet. Karen, with her rigid rules and draconian demands, had become the very thing she despised, an outlier. Her vision of the neighborhood had crumbled like dry earth, overtaken by the lush, living quilt of clover that now connected us all. It was a beautiful irony, one that tasted like honey on the tongue. I watched from my porch as children ran barefoot across the clover, their laughter rising like birds in the twilight. They didn't care about the politics of grass. To them, it was all the same. A playground, a world of possibilities. I smiled, knowing that their innocence had, in its own way, contributed to this quiet revolution. The streets were humming with change. Other yards began to transform, patches of clover appearing like small rebellions against the tyranny of sod. It was contagious, this yearning for something more sustainable, more real. The neighborhood was waking up, slowly shedding its old skin and emerging, blinking, into a new dawn. Karen, meanwhile, had retreated. Her defeat was not public. That was not her style. It was a slow withdrawal, a quiet concession to the inevitable. The meetings at the clubhouse, once arenas of power where she reigned supreme, had become mere echoes of their former selves. Attendance dwindled, and those who remained were more interested in community gardens and rainwater collection than in the acceptable height of hedges. In the end, Karen's clipboard was no match for the groundswell of change. She had underestimated her neighbors, underestimated their desire for something more than cookie-cutter lawns and draconian rules. The clover was more than just a ground cover. It was a symbol, a testament to quiet resistance and the power of perseverance. As the last rays of sun surrendered to dusk, I leaned back in my chair, content. The air was full of the scent of clover and possibilities. I thought of Karen, perhaps peering through her curtains, still clinging to her vision of order. But the world was changing, and so was our neighborhood. We had learned to grow, to adapt. The clover had taught us that. It was not just about the grass. It was about the roots beneath, the connections we made, and the differences we embraced. The HOA had tried to force sod, but we had found something better, something lasting. With a quiet heart, I realized that sometimes the most profound changes come not with a bang, but with the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle insistence of growth.